completely lost my train of thought with that thrust. Welcome to Eat, Move, Lift, Enjoy. Eat your food, move your body, lift your weight, enjoy your life. Boosh, boosh, bosh, bash, bish. Question time. This one's an absolute monster from Gadget, or Alan Mitchell if you prefer. Sent me a bit of an essay, didn't you, Gadge? But thorough, which I appreciate. He sums it up nicely. He's done well here. Long story short, would resistance training alongside another serious discipline harm that training? So if you're training for an extreme bike ride in Alan's case. Should I just wait and get this out of the way and get back into the swing of things? Gym-wise, question mark. If you've got a serious or fairly full-on endurance event, cycling Everest multiple times up at the same hill, marathons, Ironman, extreme triathlons, if you're doing an endurance event, you need to dedicate a big chunk of time to that training. So it doesn't always leave a ton of free time to fit in like the weightlifting and the resistance training. If you start doing tons of weights, or even just some weights, or training to failure, then does that have a negative impact on your training for the endurance event? And the answer is, it can do. If you're committed to try and do everything at the same time, your programming has to be on point. It has to be thought through, it has to be detailed, you have to think about recovery, you have to think about the needs of each individual session. So in other words, it can become a bit of a ball ache. Step one, priorities. So if your monster bike ride is the priority, me personally, this is how I would do it. Block my training in for the cycling, in for the week. So you've got each week, I mean, if it's something serious, you probably will know ahead of time, but I would say at least 3-4 weeks ahead of time, and ideally all the way up to the event. You've got each week in, you know exactly what you're doing. So when I did the marathon, 16 weeks out, I knew every week what mileage I was going to do. I knew pretty well what pace I was going to do. I knew what intensity each session was going to roughly be, dictated by the pace. So when you've got that in place, then you can look at, first consideration is, do you have any free time outside of the biking? Because for a lot of people, if you're training 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, sometimes twice a day, you might not physically have enough time to fit resistance training in, which might not be ideal, but again, it's a priorities game. The endurance event's priority number one, so that has to take precedent. Resistance training can help with biking, because what position are you on when you're on a bike? A little bit hunched, maybe not to that extent. Oh, look at my massive hump. A little bit hunched, hip flexors shortened. If the biking position leads to kind of shoulders rounding forward and potentially getting tight hips, then if you said to me, Andy, I've only got 10 minutes in the gym each day, give me a couple of exercises that you think complement the bike, I would say some kind of row to open the chest up, and some kind of hip hinge deadlift movement. Oh, my hips are kind of tight, shall I do a deadlift? Gadoosh! Glutes tight, hip flexors stretched. Well, not stretched, but not overly flexed. I completely lost my train of thought with that thrust. In this way, resistance training can be complementary because you can balance things out. You can use it for injury prevention. We're doing so many miles in the legs that the legs are taking a pasting, they're taking a beating. So even though like throwing in some squats and those kind of things might help, you cannot afford to be waking up the next morning with severe or aggressive muscle soreness in the legs. It hampers your performance on the bike. It's not worth it in the short term anyway. You wouldn't have a footballer 2 days, even though he uses his legs a lot, you wouldn't have him 2 days before an important match going for squat PBs on the rack. Well, I wouldn't anyway, because great, you got a squat PB. Oh, he couldn't keep up with the striker and the opposition team scored a goal. If you're really committed to it, if you've got the time, you could do 2-a-day sessions. So by that, I would get the most important session done early in the morning or before work. So let's say you've got a 20-mile ride then the second session, the one later on in the day, you go to the gym and you do your weights, you do your resistance work. So it allows you to have like 1 or 2 meals in between, fully recover, and it allows you potentially to have like a full rest day the next day, and not, cycle one day and then lift and then cycle and then lift and then cycle, and your body just never quite gets that amount of time to recover. The other way of doing it, which is a bit more brutal but a bit more realistic from a diary point of view, if you can only train once a day, which for the vast majority that's going to be the case, you do your most important thing first. So I wouldn't advise this for the long rides, but let's say for your sprint sessions or your shorter rides or interval work, you do the intervals first, because that's the most important thing. And then after that, you go to the gym and you train, you do your upper body or your resistance work or your full body resistance session. You are not going to perform as well in that resistance session after a ride, but it allows you to still keep the resistance training in there. From a diary's perspective, you can get it done. Even saying that as I'm thinking about it, if you're doing 2-a-days or if you're doing back-to-back sessions, essentially, potentially like 2 or 3 hours of solid training, the nutrition in and around those sessions has to be on point. You have to replenish, you have to think about protein for recovery. It becomes harder. It does become harder, no doubts about it. And if you're training that much, your total energy demands for the week go up, so your total calories for the day, your requirement there goes up. How are you going to fill those calories? Do you want to be getting on a bike feeling all bloated? There's so much stuff, so many questions. I mean, Gaj, ping us an email, man, and we can go through some of this stuff. But they're just some things to think about. If you're going to try and do a serious endurance event, but you still want to lift, you have to get your programming on point. And depending on the event and depending on how many days you train, it is going to look a little bit different. So I can't give, oh, well, you should do this Monday, this Tuesday. I can if the person sits down with me. But yeah, just think about those points. 2-a-day training sessions, concurrent training sessions, prioritizing the endurance work first, think about complementary exercises in the gym. These kind of things should all help. Oh, I love that question. Such a good one. Cheers, buddy, for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions on this, stick them in the box below. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.